ways to prepare for the changing world of work. Glad to be doing this, right? So I remember that I visited a particular university somewhere in the South. And the last time I was at that university was 2015. Yes, 2015, thereabouts. By the time I was going there, um, 8 years later, I realized that there've been a lot of changes, right? There've been a lot of pretty interesting changes. I actually couldn't recall or remember certain things about that university, and that's because a lot of things, um, infrastructural changes, people changes, um, literally everything has changed around that campus compared to the last time I was there. And so I remembered speaking with somebody who was with me at that journey, and I mentioned that everything changes, right? Everything in life changes. Things never remain the same. But one of the important aspect of change that I think that we often don't take cognizance of is that the world of work changes as well. The world of work has changed. The world of work is changing, and the world of work will continue to change, whether you like it or not, whether you are prepared for it or not, right? The world of work is constantly changing. That's the first truth that I think it's important that we should create that basis of. So, I have a presentation that I'm going to share, just to help us go through this webinar accurately, right? So the topic is 7 ways to prepare for the changing world of work, right? 7 ways to prepare for the changing world of work. I mean, seven sounds like a mysterious number, but how did I get about that seven? How did I come about that seven? So at that particular experience I just shared, I started listing out certain things that I think um people need to be aware of or people need to change in their life that would help them prepare for the changing world of work. Because in that environment, which is a higher institution, right, we see or we saw a lot of infrastructural changes, right? But we are not so sure that there've been any conscious change to the curriculum, right? Or conscious change to the approach to learning. So that's another topic for another day. But 7 ways to prepare for the changing of work is to cover in my opinion, certain aspects that I think that individuals would need to change if they are going to experience flexibility, or if they are going to experience success in as the world of work constantly changes, right? So um the first question I always want to get into is so for a couple of webinars that I've had, or every teaching section that I've had, I've always loved to ask this question, and the question is, what was your great grandfather's occupation? So I mean, that question came to me earlier this year, right? And I really took time to think about it. Like, what were our great fathers doing, right, in terms of occupation? What was your great grandfather's career path? Did he ever have any? Right? And I realized that, see, society has changed to the point where there was a time in society where everything that your father or your society's everything that society ever needed was hunters, fishermen rather, hunters and fishermen, right? These were like the three prominent occupation that our great grandfathers were occupied with, right? So society was at that basic, and we're just conscious, I mean, focused on survival, right? So your great grandfather was either a farmer or a hunter or a fisherman, right? So um, because that's what all society needed at that time. That was everything society needed at that time. And so that was what your great grandfather could literally provide, right? But again, society began to grow, became more complex, and then and there were now demands for on more complex roles, occupation, and then we began to experience um, conversations like career paths and jobs and the workplace workforce and all of that. But that brings me to a particular conversation or a particular idea that, I mean, if you're listening to this right now, you are not unfamiliar with. Perhaps you might have heard of what is called the four industrial revolution. In my sociology class when I was on campus, in sociology we were taught the industrial revolution, and one of the things that we learned from that class was that the Industrial Revolution began somewhere in England, and that was when man began to invent tools or machines that would help them do more, that would help them produce much more from their farms, right? And um, industries, textile industries were the order of the day, right? So the first revolution was simply a revolution that is characterized by mechanization, where steam power was produced or was invented to help work, to help achieve work better, right? As against when man was just using basic crude instruments on the farms. So that's that. And then society evolved. So society keeps evolving. That's like the central theme of this conversation is that society keeps evolving, and as society is evolving, there is now demand on what work should be. There's now demand on certain aspects of work. There's now much more demands on new forms of work and workers and the workplace, right? So from mechanization, we experience electrification, which is simply just another improvement on mechanization. So this time around, we're talking about mass production powered by electricity, right? But that's not enough. Society keeps evolving. Around the year 1969, there was the rise of information technology, right? And so we experienced automation. Um, Building upon that, around the year 2011, we society keeps evolving, and revolution got into the stage where what we are talking about right now is digital technology or digital economy, digitalization, right? So cyber physical systems, networks, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence. Those are like the those are like the improvements on the automation or the information technology revolution that we have experienced. So it's important to keep this at the front of your mind, because this you can't talk about the ways the world of work is changing without understanding where we are coming from in terms of industrial revolution and where we are. This is not the end. Because society keeps evolving, I can guarantee that in the next few years, we're going to experience another shift or another revolution, right? So it's important to keep this, um, uh, keep it handy, right? So that we ride on the conversation, right? So having understood this, it's important to say that everything is in a constant change, the constant state of change, and nothing can stop it. Change will happen to us. Change will happen around us. Change can happen within us. But it's important. The reason why we are having this conversation is so 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 make the point that it's important that you respond to change effectively. So there are only two things you can do to change, actually. You can either respond to change, which is a positive thing, or you are reacting to change, which is negative. Every reaction usually is negative because you were not prepared for it. So every change you are not prepared for impacts on you negatively. But every change that you are prepared for, you are able to respond accurately to such changes. And that's why we are having such conversations, regardless of where you are in your lifetime or in your life. Change is something you cannot run away from. Change is something you cannot stop. As a matter of fact, don't try to stop changes that happen, whether in your environment or in your industry, right? The best way to respond to change is by preparing yourself to respond accurately and effectively to change. What are the defining changes that we have experienced in our world in the last few years or decades. First, we must understand that, I mean, this is another concept that I learned from my sociology class, globalization. Now, what that means is simple. The world has now become a very small village, right? Globalization has brought every word into becoming a small village. So your competitor right now are not people within your immediate local environment. Your competitors are literally people beyond your immediate locality. So what that means is that you whatever you do right now, you're not just thinking in terms of Nigeria. If you are in Nigeria, you're also thinking in terms of what's happening across the nations, other nations, what's happening across your industry in other communities or in other countries, right? What is expected? What are the standards? That's where you begin to hear global best practices, because the world is now a global village. That's a defining change that we have experienced in our world in the last decade. The second change we have experienced in our world in the last decade is information explosion. There was a particular philosopher who was said to have read everything in his lifetime before he died at 70. I think he died at 70 years, but it was said that he had read everything in the 16th century, everything that was ever written. But after then, nobody has been able to keep or beat that record. And that's because information keeps exploding since the 16th century, right? So it's very, very impossible right now to catch up with the amount of information explosion that we are experiencing in our world. That's a defining change, right? Another defining change is communication. The dynamics of communication has changed. Remember, we began from the age where letters were a thing, right? And then they were now becoming there were now new forms of communication, from telegraph to telegram, right? And then the communication system that is becoming very rampant, WhatsApp, right? Everybody literally is on WhatsApp. So many years ago, it's very difficult to communicate something within seconds and minutes to somebody outside of your country. But today, you can literally be in Nigeria and be having communication with somebody hundreds, millions miles away from you, right? That just by the power of the internet, right? So another defining changes that I've seen, that I've experienced in our world, is ease of mobility. Somebody mentioned recently that is Japa made easy. There was a time where even if you have all of the money in the world, it's just going to be difficult for you to travel. But by the invention of planes, jets, you can just easily move from one country to another. So there's ease of mobility, and that has shaped the changes that we have experienced in our world. Again, just to add that because of the ease of mobility, we are seeing what is called cultural infusion, right? Or cultural the influx of different cultures, right? The coming together of different culture. We are experiencing more culture shock. We are also experiencing more culture diffusion, right? And so a lot of cultures are being influenced by other cultures, right? So that's what ease of mobility has done. It's also important to add digital technology. It's at the forefront of shaping the changes that we have experienced, in the world today. I thought I should add this as well. China. There's a time where the world power was United States, but today we all know that it's not just United States. We are experiencing a new superpower, China, and there are other nations of the world that are also clamoring for that relevance, in the world. And it's shaping, whether you like it or not, everything that happens in the globe shapes and impacts what happens in your country, right? So all of these things are important. And I think we should have that conversation as well. So now let's go straight into what are the 7 changes I believe that you can make to prepare yourself for the changing world of work. We have established the fact that the world of work is constantly changing, whether you like it or yes, whether you are prepared or not. It's constantly changing. But the way to respond to these changes is to prepare yourself for the changing world of work. So in my opinion, how can you, what are the 7 things you can do, or what are the 7 ways, what are the 7 changes you can make wherever you are, right? I mean, out of the 7 things I would mention, maybe 4 works for you or 3 works for you. Pick what works for you, and I think it's important that you help yourself prepare for the change changing world of work. So the first, in my opinion, is that one way to prepare for the changing world of work is to change your knowledge base, right? And at this point, what I mean by that is that you literally need to pursue information that are relevant to the changes in your industry or in your environment. So certain things change as your industry keeps experiencing changes. It's important that you change your knowledge base. There are certain information that are no longer relevant or no longer serves the purpose in your industry. You just have to update your knowledge base, improve on the content on information that you have, right? And somebody mentioned that knowledge increases in every industry almost every 6 weeks or every 6 months. So which means that you can no longer you can't just rely on on what you knew 4 years ago. And I'm speaking to this so young people who perhaps you're on campus right now, and some of the informations that you are being fed are no longer relevant to your industry. So I'd say um, so let me give a case in point, right? So if perhaps you're studying mass communication and some of the textbooks that your lecturers are using to train you or to prepare you for your industry are still within the 90s, it means that you are not being prepared for the changing world of work, right? So my advice for you is you need to pursue the information that are relevant to the changes that already occur within your industry, right? So go out and purchase information, find those information, be conversant. Remember that we mentioned that globalization has made the world a very small village. So you can no longer just be comfortable with what is available within your local environment. By leveraging the internet and digital technology, you can find information that has global relevance and improve yourself and improve your knowledge base. So for me, that's like the first changes you must make, or the first change you must make rather, to prepare yourself for the changing world of work. So your knowledge base needs to be updated. You cannot just rely on what is being taught 2 years ago, 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, some things that you learned in January might change by July. That's how fast and how much pace the world is going right now. A lot of elements within your industry are changing every single month. So you cannot just rely on outdated information. That's like my first point. Second, change your skill set. If knowledge will lead you to skill sets. I know it is not also equals to I can do it, right? Most times you can know something in theoretical form, but that does not translate into skill sets, right? So you must be able to find how to translate that knowledge into skill sets. And sometimes, I mean, a typical example, a typical way of doing this is find projects that helps you implement some of those theoretical knowledge and bring that to bear within your industry. So yes, you can change your knowledge base. That's the good foundation, but also change your skill sets. Pursue new skills, right? A lot of skills are being outdated. Um, so there's a report that World Economic Forum always publish every year. I guess it's an annual report. Within in that report, what they do is they do a lot of research around new skills that will be relevant across different industries, and so they publicize such reports for your use. If you get that report handy, it helps you prepare yourself for the changes that are occurring not just within your country but in the globe. So because it's a constant thing. The world is a global village, so you can't your competitors are not just in Nigeria or Africa. It's a global matter, right? What we're talking about is a global matter. So you are changing your skill sets to align with the global demands within your industry, right? You are changing your knowledge base, you are changing your skill sets to align with the global demands within your industry. So it's important. The first change you must make, your knowledge base. The second change you must make, your skill set. What's the third? The third is you must change your library, right? And that aligns with what we've been talking about, changing your knowledge, changing your skill sets. But change your library. And change your library is just a typical example is that you are perhaps transitioning from one industry to another. Maybe you used to be in banking, right? Let's use that as an example. You used to be in banking, and everything within your library is banking and finance books. Not bad, but you also have novels that are not really relevant to your industry. You're spending a lot of money buying novels, fictions, but now you are transitioning into financial technology. That's an aspect of the financial services. My advice would be that you should invest in new resources, right? And investing in new resources don't have to be complex. It can be as simple as listening to podcasts, right? So you can find podcasts um, hosted by somebody, an expert within that industry who is sharing knowledge, and then you can update your knowledge and your skill sets, in minutes, on a regular basis. You can find videos on YouTube, right? And so these things can be incremental. You can start with podcasts, move to videos, and when you watch some of those videos, you realize that some of the experts or some of the professionals are recommending certain books that would help you, and you should add such books to your library, right? So this especially for people who are transitioning into a new career path based on how the changes are happening to them or within their industry. So change your library. It's not for everybody, right? But you should know which you should change. You should know the changes you should make in your own life. So invest in new resources. It's an important tip. The fourth I think that you should change is also your circle. This is one hack that many people do not realize. This is one hack that many people do not realize. If you want to get into a new industry, if you want to get into anything, find people who are already doing such, right? And join that circle. I'll give you a good example from my life. Um, the moment so before I got my first job in human resources, I was already in like six WhatsApp groups of HR professionals in Lagos as at that time, because then I was staying in Lagos. I was in like six HR groups, WhatsApp groups, before I was even ready to get a job. By the time I was ready to get a job, it was just easy because I was already assimilating the atmosphere. I was getting used to the lingua franca of that industry. I understood things. I understood the terminologies even before I got my first job. So it's an hack because within that professional network, you find opportunities. Those networks are like wells of opportunities where opportunities always dances around. And if you are not there, imagine what you'll be missing. So if you are moving into a new industry, for every industry you find yourself, right? Always try to find a new circle. Always trying to find networks that helps you become better, right? So one of the ways you should prepare for the changing world of work is ensure you are in a community of people who are also with ensure you are in a community of people of like-minded professionals that helps you become better, helps you also find opportunities. So it's not just finding opportunities. Some of those conversations are shaping the future, are shaping your perspective, and are also shaping your mindset towards your industry, right? That's an hack. I think that it's important that you know that. The fifth thing I must mention is that you should change your priorities. So the reason I added these priorities is because with the rate of information explosion, you can't afford to be pursuing everything, right? You must really define your priorities and focus on your expectations. You can't afford to be everywhere. You can't afford to be everywhere. You can't be involved in everything. Be selective in how you spend your time. Be very selective with how you spend your time, right? There's a lot of information going out there. There's a lot of courses, there's a lot of content on the internet. There's a lot, but you just need to change your priorities and be focused, be selective in how you spend your time. The sixth for me is change your strategy. How you did something yesterday may not necessarily be serving you tomorrow, right? Change your strategy or change your tactics, right? Because you did certain things certain way yesterday does not mean that those ways would apply today, right? Be ready to adapt, be ready, be flexible to change your strategy, be flexible to change your tactics, right? So I remember that so there was a particular book I bought in 2015, yeah. And that book was talking about careers and jobs. Today, that book is so irrelevant, and the reason is simple. I'm going to tell you why. In that book, that book is just a testament of how a lot of information or a lot of things changes. In that book, there was a particular information that says that one of the Nigerian dailies, I don't know if it's this day or I can't remember the name of that Nigerian newspaper, but in that the book mentioned the particular day of the week where they post jobs. Where if you're a job seeker, just buy that particular newspaper every Thursday, for example, and then you will find multiples of jobs you can apply for. Right? I don't think that works today. The last time I can't remember the last time I bought a newspaper. Right? And if I ever did, I can't remember the last time I found any job application or job vacancy on such newspaper, right? So what that means is if your strategy, that used to be a thing, right? That used to be a strategy for getting jobs many years ago, but that does not work today. That shows how a lot of things have changed, right? That shows how a lot of things will change. Today, LinkedIn may be like the in thing, right? But tomorrow, who knows? Something else may come in and just, take LinkedIn out of the market. But what I'm trying to say is you must be flexible to adapt to new strategies, especially strategies that align to your goal, right? Somebody mentioned that the definition of strategy is anything you do to get to your goal, right? So it's as simple as that. Anything you do that helps you achieve your goal is your strategy. So you must be flexible to change your strategy. The strategy that works for you yesterday may not work for you tomorrow. The seventh thing, in my opinion, is change your location. And I added this. So this is a honest truth. When I wanted to do this webinar, it was 6 ways to prepare for the changing world of work. Along the line, this came to my mind: change your location. Sometimes, and most times, your sometimes and most times, environment matters a lot in environment matters a lot in our goal to achieve success. There's an ideal environment for everything, and I like to use this example. If you take a seed and put it on a tile floor, you cannot, if you pray and fast, don't expect that seed to germinate and flourish. There are certain careers and there are certain industries, right? That there are certain careers and there are certain industries that require you to change your location. There are certain careers and there are certain industries that require you to change your location or change your environment. And it's an honest truth. Sometimes we don't like to accept the fact. I used to give this. I give this simple example. I mean, this may not be totally correct, but I give this example. If you studied in Nigeria, for example, if you studied, say, petroleum engineering, chemical engineering, all of the engineering that has to do with that has to do with working in the oil and gas industry. There's one particular state in Nigeria where if it's engineering or oil and gas, or one particular region, if it's engineering, oil and gas, anything that has to do with the oil and gas sector, we know that there's a particular region where you just have to be in to find such jobs. Not because in other states you will not find a job that aligns with your course of study, but it's just that there are certain locations or there are certain environments where the possibility or the probability of getting a job within that industry is higher than other states. So you want to move to such location where it is easier for you to find or access such opportunity, right? There's other location or environment. For example, you're somebody who wants to fly high in tech. There are some locations where you just have to be in. Not because in other locations you won't find the opportunity or you can't create the opportunity, but sometimes the availability of the word infrastructure